Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Super Connector podcast. Today we have Adrianne Tamar Arachne. Welcome, Adrianne.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
So today we are going to get into astrology, take a little dive, and we're basically doing a beginner to intermediate look at some astrological concepts, specifically how to look at a birth chart and read a birth chart. So I'm going to be the test subject. Adrianne is going to be reading my birth chart and telling me what she sees. She only got it yesterday, so she's ready to go. And before we do that, we're just going to get a little bit of biography from Adrianne. So will you tell us, kind of like in your view, what are some of the most important things about your journey so far that you'd like to share?
Yeah. Now I'm racking my life for bullet points. It's like, what do you pick out of the story? I guess just in context of what we're talking about today, I've been studying astrology since I was about 14, which is kind of interesting in that I was raised in a Christian fundamentalist homeschooled family. And, the Jesus that I was raised with was not very cool with astrology. So it was one of those things where I kind of grokked it naturally and really got it, but I had to kind of hide it from this other part of my life. So I kind of fragmented myself, where I was like, well, there's this religion I have that I really believe in, but also there's this esoteric knowledge coming through this ancient art form that really makes sense to me. And I don't really know what to do with that. But it wasn't until later on in my 20s that I had a huge shamanic awakening and walked away from my religion that I, in my wholeness, embraced astrology and began studying to the next level. But I always had an ability to understand the language, and I think a lot of people who are naturally really drawn to astrology would say something like what I'm about to say, which is that it felt like remembering a language. It didn't feel like learning something new. It felt like something coming through from another life, which is a very 12th house thing to say. We were just talking about the 12th house before we came on here. Yeah, it was very 12th housey. But I've been giving readings professionally for, where are we at? About 8 years now. I mean, I kind of was before that, and that I would be like in the break room at work and people would just bring me their charts and be like, tell me what's going on, and we would just be sitting there talking about it. And I think I officially claimed it about 8 years ago and began giving readings around that time. And, my style is very, it's a little slapdash combination of lots of things. I've been studying lots of different teachers for a long time, lots of different forms for a long time. But I think as I've grown into myself and my own style, what I've just grown to embrace about myself is I have a highly intuitive, very Pisces way of reading a chart. And some of the knowledge is combined with what I do, but also it's just kind of that open portal, open channel, things just kind of coming through.
So you've done a lot of miles with the chart reading.
Yes. Yeah. Thousands of hours on charts for sure.
And so in terms of occupation as well, you are a painter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my joke is that I have all your woo-woo jobs checked off, like the full bingo board in my life, which is, once again, so Pisces. Like, I did not incarnate on this planet to be a mathematician or a strategist or an academic. Like, it's just not in my wiring at all. But yeah, actually, one of my main deals is I've been a massage therapist for about 15 years, which is kind of, I just sort of dabble in that these days. I'll take a few clients a week. And then, yeah, I take a lot of astrology clients, a lot of consultations. And then, Yeah, the what has become more and more the main gig is visionary art, and I spend a lot of time in my studio, and I paint paintings for collectors, for people who commission me for individual projects. I do some illustration projects, like for book projects or for various design projects, stuff like that. And maybe just through virtue of the fact of my rising in Aries and my North Node in Aries, I've kind of refused to do anything that doesn't align with my deal, with who I am. And even though that has probably made my journey a lot harder than it's needed to be, over time now people come to me essentially for what I do, stylistically, for my world, for my particular voice, how I download things from the superconscious. So I do a lot of art. That's kind of the main voice. I think having a Mercury in Pisces, if I could just speak in images all the time, that's what I would do anyway. So I'm really grateful that that gets to be a lot of my life.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
You have a really amazing style. I know I said this to you recently, but I follow a lot of artists and a lot of visionary artists, and you're really one of my favorite.
oh, thank you.
Like, I think you have one of the best styles. It really appeals to me in a lot of ways, and I can also tell that you're very it's like you have the technique, like you have really strong technique, but also like the soul in the pieces that you make is really it just jumps off the page, you can really feel it. So I appreciate that a lot about you.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I think it's I did go to art school, and I think I have Venus in Capricorn and Mars in Taurus, and there is this earthy need to achieve some kind of mastery. And I think at the time when I was in art school, I'm at refinement of skills. I think that's aided in having a refined skill set and voice to tell these more ineffable Piscean energies and stories through that language. But thank you so much for recognizing that and for seeing that. I appreciate it.
Thank you for sharing. We all appreciate it a lot.
29 degrees Libra, meaning you are a true cover. You are about to be, actually, you're literally 3 minutes away from being a Scorpio. So you are right there. Yeah. And have you felt like a true cusp energy your whole life? Is that something that's really resonant for you?
Yeah, very. I mean, October 23rd is if you just look at a generic, what sign are you, a lot of times you'll get Scorpio. So I thought for a long time that I was Scorpio until I actually looked at my birth chart. And yeah, the cusp identity makes a lot of sense for me. I definitely can see the blend.
Absolutely. And having that unique cusp identity right off the bat is something that, growing up and learning astrology, you would have probably been reading some of Libra and then reading some of Scorpio and probably beginning to merge them both in your mind, just kind of doing the best you can to cobble together your concept of you in some way, right?
Yeah, that's accurate.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're going to talk about the rest of these planets here really conjunct or affecting the sun identity. But for a minute here, we'll just focus on the sun. In astrology, the sun is very much the seat of vitality. It is the incarnational element and purpose of your light, if you will. You came into incarnation at a time of year when thematically the light was shining into these themes. In Libra, we have a cardinal air sign that speaks a lot to a reality that is doing most of its growth through relationships. Doing life with quote unquote the other in whatever way, whether it be romantic relationship, your friendships, just creating balance and harmony to the best of your ability with the other person in your life is going to consume a lot of your vital life energy. And Libras often, for that reason, have many significant partnerships in their life. Even if they only have one, say they're only married once or have one long-term significant partnership romantically, there will still be many different significant partnerships, maybe in a more peripheral way in their life, that come through and activate deep parts of their growth. Now, once again, the fact that you're on this cusp and literally 3 minutes away from becoming a Scorpio, that Libra identity is really influenced by the Scorpio incarnation, which is your neighboring or your next incarnation. Scorpio is a fixed water sign that is here doing a lot of its deepest work through transformational experience. Scorpio is here finding out the true value of life through high highs and low lows. Scorpio is kind of excavating the truth of what existence is all about through digging really, really, really deep into existence. And thus, Scorpio often uncovers a lot of the underbelly of life. Scorpio is very familiar with how people cheat or lie or manipulate or are dishonest and not authentic to themselves in situations in order to preserve life for themselves. And in being so aware of that, Scorpio is doing a great deal of shadow work in this incarnation, in that Scorpio is learning to see in others what is inherent in its own experience. And that's where we get into, the scorpion versus the eagle versus the phoenix. I'm sure you've heard that in the Scorpio. Have it at 29 degrees Libra, meaning you are a true cutter. You are about to be, actually, you're literally 3 minutes away from being a Scorpio. So you are right there. Yeah. And have you felt like a true cusp energy your whole life? Like, is that something that's really resonant for you?
Yeah, very. I mean, October 23rd is if you just look at a generic, like, what sign are you, a lot of times you'll get Scorpio.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought for a long time that I was Scorpio until I actually looked at my birth chart. And yeah, the cusp identity makes a lot of sense for me. I definitely can see the blend.
Absolutely. Having that unique cusp identity right off the bat is something that, growing up and learning astrology, you would have probably been reading some of Libra and then reading some of Scorpio and probably beginning to merge them both in your mind, just kind of doing the best you can to cobble together like your concept of you in some way, right?
Yeah, that's accurate.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're going to talk about the rest of these planets here really conjunct or affecting the sun identity. But for a minute here, we'll just focus on the sun. In astrology, the sun is very much the seat of vitality. It is the incarnational element and purpose of your light, if you will. You came into incarnation at a time of year when thematically the light was shining into these themes. In Libra, we have a cardinal air sign that speaks a lot to a reality that is doing most of its growth through relationships. Doing life with quote unquote the other in whatever way, whether it be romantic relationship, your friendships, just creating balance and harmony to the best of your ability with the other person in your life is going to consume a lot of your vital life energy. And Libras often, for that reason, have many significant partnerships in their life. Even if they only have one, say they're only married once or have one long-term significant partnership romantically, there will still be many different significant partnerships, maybe in a more peripheral way in their life, that come through and activate deep parts of their growth. Now, once again, the fact that you're on this cusp and literally 3 minutes away from becoming a Scorpio, that Libra identity is really influenced by the Scorpio incarnation, which is your neighboring or your next incarnation. Scorpio is a fixed water sign that is here doing a lot of its deepest work through transformational experience. Scorpio is here finding out the true value of life through high highs and low lows. Scorpio is kind of excavating the truth of what existence is all about through digging really, really, really deep into existence. And thus, Scorpio often uncovers a lot of the underbelly of life. Scorpio is very familiar with how people cheat or lie or manipulate or are dishonest and not authentic to themselves in situations in order to preserve life for themselves. And in being so aware of that, Scorpio is doing a great deal of shadow work in this incarnation, in that Scorpio is learning to see in others what is inherent in its own experience. And that's where we get into, you know, the scorpion versus the eagle versus the phoenix. I'm sure you've heard that in the Scorpio. You know, Scorpios are often evolving from their base instincts and their very primal human desire nature into death and rebirth and transformation towards their higher, more transcendent nature. And honestly, Scorpio often does it through a lot of intensity and a lot of death and rebirth. There's, you know, the Scorpio incarnation is not here having a lighthearted deal. Does that resonate?
Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely like, I can see in myself almost this like desire to create that even when it doesn't need to be around, you know what I mean? Like one pattern I've noticed in my life is kind of like almost like creating these unnecessary challenges or struggles that I'm like, why did I even do it like that? It was so much harder than it needed to be, but it's like,
right.
I couldn't help myself, you know. But those are, you know, also like those challenges I'm finding are the most meaningful and rewarding for me in the end. Like, that's what it comes down to. It's also interesting to look at that energy in contrast with Libra, kind of wanting everything to be like harmonious and peaceful, and that's a balance I've been like just observing a lot.
Right.
Kind of like I have this like on the one side like almost like a people pleaser, like wanting to be friends with everybody, and on the other side I have like the, you know, the investigator getting below the surface, or like pushing people's buttons, or what, you know, like that kind of thing. Although I know Libra does like to also do the devil's advocate game. If you are familiar with that pattern, but it's like if an argument or something is too one-sided, they'll play devil's advocate just for the fun of it to balance it out. One note on that is also I was a C-section baby, so
oh wow,
like,
okay.
You're coming out Libra.
Yeah, you kind of that's interesting. I wonder, left to your own devices, if you will,
Right, yeah.
if you would have crossed the Scorpio threshold and maybe been 3 minutes on the other side, or who
Yeah.
knows.
It
Yeah.
seems like that was my plan because they waited for a long time and
You're like, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna be a Scorpio.
yeah.
There's so many significant things about the moment you came into the world. It's interesting even to hear that you were a C-section baby. Like, the word fated comes to mind when you see so many very, what's the word I'm reaching for? It's almost uh like too pointed to be coincidental things about this little arrangement right here. And there's a lot of there's a ton of information and a lot of layers going on right in the area where your sun is. Now, if we're keeping this super beginner astrology, all that we would really do is just look at the fact that your sun is Libra, right on the cusp of Scorpio. You've got Pluto and Mercury in really tight orb conjunction with that sun. You got Saturn kind of nearby in Scorpio. But if you're okay with it, I want to dive just a little deeper in this area and talk about specifically, well, two things. One of them is that your sun is almost cazimi with Pluto, and they both are 29 degrees. So they both are anaretic, and I'll break down what both of those words mean here. Now, whenever a planet is at a 29th degree, we have what's called an anaretic planet, meaning, and here I just circled the 29th degree of Pluto. You have Pluto at 29 Libra. You also have the sun at 29 Libra. Now, when a planet is anaretic, it is pushing very hard into the completion of the thematic lesson it's been going through. It's pushing to the completion of the archetype, essentially. So you have like a closing out lessons of Libra, is literally oldest degree in Libra, and literally 3 minutes away from the beginning of a new sign in the case of your sun. A little farther back with Pluto, but not by much. And anaretic planets become very important because it's something that burns extra bright in the life, because there's something about the life energy that is pushing really hard into the thing that's next. So there's a little bit of a jumping off the cliff feeling with those planets. In your case, it's literally your vitality, your sun. There's something about your life where you're winging yourself into the finality, into the closing abyss, if you will, of the lessons of Libra, and kind of free falling into the birth of the next deal, which is Scorpio. Now, even if the next sign was not Scorpio, and you just had Pluto sitting on your sun, that would be enough in and of itself to create a very Plutonian existence. Now, Pluto rules Scorpio, so you happen to be born during a time in the world where Pluto was just like 5 minutes away from being in its own sign, or its sign of rulership. But you came in as this late degree Libra with Pluto right on your sun, essentially giving you this existence that is just transforming relationship issues like rapid fire. Like, there's kind of no break in working through pleasantries, if you will, to the core raw truth of what it is to be in relationship with the other. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I see that, and I feel that.
Yeah.
And it's funny you used the jumping off the cliff metaphor too, because I was a cliff jumper when I was younger.
There it is.
I mean, I still try and fly through the air from time to time, but I used to Yeah, I used to jump off cliffs and do flips and all that, all that crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Seek that out very intentionally.
Yeah. I love how the chart is just so literal sometimes. It's one of my favorite things when that happens. I'm just like, oh, and there it is. It's like painfully literal.
Yeah, that's so fun. I've had a couple of different really good readings, but nobody's pointed that one out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're kind of with Pluto right on your sun, there's a lot of different effects that creates in and of itself. And we could even break that down for like 3 hours, and looking at the story of your life and how that's played out. But one of the themes of that conjunction is an extremely powerful magnetism, in that people, when you encounter people, specifically what we might consider to be really fated persons who cross your path, who they're essentially crossing your path to have a transformational effect on you or you on them. They're essentially going to be seeing you through their relationship to power. Now, if they're in bad relationship with their own power, they're going to probably find some way to demonize you or to perceive you in their story of abuse of power. And really, the other part of this is that you might have had to come through a lot of experiences where you've been learning to sit with your own power in a way where you're not abusing it. So that could be part of the story as well. But you'll either have that experience, or you'll have people who give all their power away to you and almost want to put you on some kind of guru pedestal, and they think that you're using power the most correct out of anyone they've ever met, and oh my God, you're God, they just want to give it away to you. So there might be these extreme experiences you're having with people when it comes to balance of power that has been like a lifelong theme. Yeah. So also one other thing that I would say about just this, let's see, the fact that Saturn and Pluto were in this proximity, and the very particular time that you incarnated, is that this was the last time before 2020 that we had a Saturn-Pluto conjunction. So Saturn and Pluto only come together, there's like a range of time. I think it's like 36 to 42 years or so. Those two come into conjunction. That is, Saturn moves faster than Pluto. So Saturn takes about 30 years to get to make a full orbit through all the signs, and it takes at least 36 to 40 to meet back up with wherever Pluto has gotten to. Pluto can spend up to like 22 years in a sign, so Pluto is a slow crawler. But Saturn, being the planet of a great deal of contraction and a great deal of harsh, cold reality, if you will, and Pluto being a planet that has a lot to do with the balance of power and with death and rebirth and with transformation. When those two planets come together, it often heralds a time where we go through an upheaval of power and structures as we know them, often coinciding with disease, with war, with a lot of intensity. So we just went through one in 2020, which was, it should be obvious circumstantially to everyone. Times were tough.
You don't need an astrologer to notice this one.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, it was really interesting watching the kind of the preparation. I mean, I'm sure you had the same experience of knowing it was coming and hearing all these people talk about it and just being like, oh my God, what is this gonna be? Mm-hmm. And then it unfolding in a way that, really described what we imagined it would be, and is like this sense of just being stuck in this motion that was really painful and suffocating, and not knowing. I mean, for me, I felt very helpless this past year of just being like, why are we doing this? Like, this is so crazy. It just like, just things not making a lot of sense. And I think a lot of where that comes from is that it was a lot of changes are being made in terms of power dynamics and different entities and governments grabbing power, and you know, and the virus being a very good opportunity for people to do that, you know.
Yeah, you got it. That's well put. And I would say thematically it was all happening at the end of Capricorn, and so much of what was thematically up for destruction, upheaval, was shadowy Capricorn themes, right? Like the old white man, or the old white goat, you know, who has been traveling up who has been building a structure in an outdated way that is designed so that the few can have much while the rest have less. Shadow Capricorn, you know, and that was where Saturn and Pluto conjoined January of last year. So yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, and yeah, looking ahead to it since, oh God, how many years? I think I had been looking ahead to it since about 2014, 2015. And I was like, what is that? I was like, what is that? You know, and I had been talking to a lot of other astrologers about it. We all saw it coming, and we had different theories on how it was going to play out. And then when it did play out, I think we were all just kind of like, okay, this is how it goes, you know?
Makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Well, you were born during the last one, the one before the one we just had. So lucky you, just came sneaking on in. And the parting when Saturn was finally moving on from its junction with Pluto. Now, actually, I think Saturn did retrograde back later on in 83 and did hit, like there was a second hit of the Pluto-Saturn conjunction. But, you know, one thing that comes to mind around that time was the AIDS epidemic. And, you know, I mean, talk about disease, but disease that affected relationships, Libra, and sex, Scorpio, like there it was, you know, and massive amounts of fear.
Right there on my cusp.
Yeah, boom, there it is. Yeah. And it's interesting because your sun, you know, your light kind of came in all up in this business, you know, you kind of came in with the incarnational impact of that time, you know, which is figuring out power dynamic in relationship. It's figuring out what action is based on fear versus what is based on authenticity and authentic use of power in relationship. I mean, these are very, very deep relationship themes that are pretty inherent in the work that you're doing here.
That's very cool. Interesting to hear.
Yeah.
I'm kind of transforming my career a little bit right now to go very much more in that direction. And it was just, it's taken me a while to kind of figure out how I can express myself in that way, in a way that feels good to me. And it is kind of wrapped up with astrology a little bit, but also with, recently I've been doing this work of literally helping people to get right with their relationships within themselves so that they can find a partner.
Boom.
Which is like
that right there is Saturn and Scorpio AF. Like that's doing it right, you know. You're on it. I mean, you know, Saturn is a slightly outer orb conjunction, but it still is close enough to be in conjunction with your sun, which, you know, also has Pluto on it. And the fact that these are both in your 10th house, you know, this whole territory, Well, I mean, yeah, I guess Sun, Pluto are technically ninth, but they're just so goddamn close. And then Saturn is there in the 10th. I mean, there's so much about your life energy pushing towards a career and a reputation that helps heal people's relationships, and not in the most comfortable way. You know, you're going to be that raw, guiding, transformational force that helps push people over their thresholds into the kind of life fulfillment they're actually really looking for. You know, something that you probably witness a lot in people around you is how they stop, like right as they're getting close to the stuff in life that would help them go deep enough with themselves to really break through. You know,
Mm.
you probably witness people right at that breakthrough point a lot, and you want to just, oh, you want to push them over, you want to push them off the cliff, or you want to jump off the cliff with them, you know, into their deeper potential. And essentially, that's probably going to figure higher and higher into the kind of work that you're doing in your career.
Mm. Cool. Yeah, it's really nice to have that confirmation, affirmation.
Yeah.
Because it's, yeah, I mean, it was it's interesting also that it was brought about by this other Saturn Pluto conjunction.
Oh, for sure. Well, you know
Yeah.
what? So I don't have transits pulled up in this chart, but that would have happened right about here in Capricorn, and
Mm-hmm.
that would have been in square.
Right. Yeah.
That would have been intense aspect with all of this stuff right here. So
Exactly.
bet your sweet ass you were feeling that, and you
Yeah.
were getting kicked into motion from that. I mean, you would have been so uncomfortable, you
It
know.
was very, yeah. It was
Yeah.
very. It was. I can really see the beauty and the benefit of it, and it
Mhm.
definitely like really felt like a struggle a lot of the time.
Right. Totally, totally. I talked to a lot of, I had a lot of clients come to me for readings who were 1980. Interesting to see how that manifested for your whole micro generation, if you will.
Mm,
Yeah.
that's cool. Those type of patterns must be really, yeah, an interesting part of your work. It's just
Hmm.
like the timing that people come to you with their readings. And I mean, I don't do a ton of readings, but I noticed the last time I was doing them, like uh, everybody who I did a reading for was in or around their Saturn return. So
Oh, for sure.
I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, you know what, you're right. It'll make a believer out of you. You know, you start
Mhm.
to see these patterns emerge, and it's just like, this cannot be an accident.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, totally.
it's just all too aligned. It's crazy.
It's too
Um,
much, yeah. And I became a believer through investigation, in my
right.
say the very Aquarius rising way. I was like, okay, I've gathered enough data to really see that there's something to this.
Hmm. Totally. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Um, by the way, just a quick check-in. I've dropped a ton of information just talking about this, and I just want to do a brain check. Are we feeling good? Are we feeling synthesized so far?
Okay, yeah, you got my psychic message. I was really interested in the Sun Pluto conjunction
Yeah,
and the cusp identity
yeah.
and that stuff. So I think you picked up the message. Unsurprisingly.
Yeah, I'm decent at it. We'll put it that way. I've got
Yeah,
a good antenna.
I could certainly guess that from your
Yeah.
chart. I live with two very psychic water sign females, so
Mm.
I'm
Yeah,
sort
what's your wife? Is she a Scorpio?
my wife is a Cancer.
Oh, okay.
We
Gotcha.
both have Taurus moon.
Okay.
Is Sagittarius rising.
Okay. Nice. Yeah. That's, well, it's nice too that you both have the Taurus moon. That's got to be very stabilizing.
It's a real blessing. Yeah, I think about that all the time.
Yeah.
It's like a fairly calm emotional center.
like there's certain sign placements I have a little bit of a bias towards, and Taurus moon is one of my favorites. I got to admit, I love my Taurus moon people. You guys are just such a shoulder, you know, like whatever's going on, it's like the Taurus moon is so centered.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Appreciate that.
Well, so speaking of which, you know, we honestly, I am going to revisit Saturn here in a little while, but just so we don't get too caught up here, let's go down just to your rising, and then we'll go over to your moon. Like you mentioned not too long ago, you have an ascendant in Aquarius, and that's what I just circled down here, this angle. This looks a little funky in whole sign. Believe it or not, what I tend to do most of the time is actually just pull up Placidus house system and then just do the conversion in my mind when it comes to whole signs. But that gets confusing for everyone. So for the sake of our purposes, I just pulled it up in whole sign. But just so people are aware of what the rising or the ascendant is, it's not actually a planet, it's an angle, meaning that the ancients came up with a system of dividing up the sky into different angles and sort of segmenting the sky into different houses or different areas of life. As they studied planets moving through those places, they noticed that it created certain effects in different ways, just sort of in mundane astrology, but also just in the study of people's lives. These angles and these houses seem to dictate certain qualities that were activated in different ways in people's life. So the rising or the ascendant would have been what was on the horizon, on the eastern horizon when Alec was born, and thus it would have sort of set up the whole house system, essentially the whole house wheel. But the rising degree itself, in this case 23 degrees Aquarius, is that accurate, by the way? Do I have the right 23? Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
I am not totally sure. I know the degree should be the same regardless of which house system you're using, right?
Oh, well, I didn't like triple check with you on birth time. So typically you know, especially if someone knows their chart, I'll double check the degree, you know, of their rising sign. So yeah, we'll just assume for our purposes it's correct.
Yeah, you got the right time.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so basically that means that Alec's first house is Aquarius. The first house / the ascendant angle has a lot to do with how somebody presents their body in physical space and time. It's how you are going to navigate the world in the vehicle of your body. It is kind of the control panel that's available to you within this meat sack you were given on the planet. So there's various astrologers who have different theories on the physical appearance the ascendant / first house will give a person. I've kind of come up with my list of theories in that regard over time. But really what's a bit more interesting to me is that the first house says a lot about a person's self-concept, like how they put themselves out in the world. Aquarius is a fixed air sign, and it is very much sort of sitting on the fringes of society, watching different networks of information, and sort of taking in the big picture of those networks of information and trying to create an even bigger picture framework with that information based on the truth that it perceives. And because Aquarius takes in such a large amount of concept, knowledge, fact, strategy, just even the schematics and the mechanics of life, because Aquarius takes in so much of that information. It's often called the sign of knowing, or the sign of I know. And that Aquarius does know, you know, they know a lot. They've taken in all of the information, and because they haven't stayed in the particular box of concept that a lot of the other signs have, they're kind of fringe walkers. They're here doing something a little bit different from the crowd. Now, Aquarius being an air sign, all of the air signs care very much about other people. The air signs are the humane signs. They're very much taking the temperature on the group around them and on the people around them. So Aquarius cares a lot about people, but it also doesn't really want to follow the crowd. It wants to be the weirdo fringe walker on the outside of the crowd, close enough, but also just far enough away. Does that resonate?
I'd say that's accurate. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, right, right. There's a weirdo quality to Aquarius. There's a freaker quality to Aquarius. There is a, you know, it's ruled partially by Uranus. So there's something about the Aquarian genius that is, it comes from the ability to embrace the unconventional. And that's a very important part of its incarnation. So even just putting the ascendant or the first house here, we're going to have a person who looks a little weird. They're a little unconventional. They don't want to look like everyone else. They're also going to be drawn to doing weird things with their body. They're going to be drawn to putting their physical form into places that a lot of other people wouldn't go, but it's interesting to them. They also
super accurate.
Oh yeah, besides the cliff diving thing.
Well, yeah, I mean that, and yeah, extreme sports plus psychedelics, and together sometimes, or like a
yeah, there we go.
Just and even like, I mean, when I was younger, I used to just travel around by myself a lot, and like I'd just like wander around and see what would happen, and people would come up to me, and like one thing that like a blessing that I have in this lifetime is that I have like, it's fairly like open demeanor, or like maybe like my eyes or some part, whatever it is, like people feel comfortable coming up to me and talking to me. And so when I would travel by myself, I would just have this like cultural experience of like random people just coming up and sharing their life story with me, or you know, just having some type of experience together. And it happens without fail wherever I go, and it's really it's interesting.
What you just described is a perfect assessment of, you know, this ascendant angle in Aquarius trine, what we got going on up here in Libra. Now this trine is a harmonious aspect, that thick blue line going between them, meaning that there is a harmonious flow between air and air that is very humane. It's very humanitarian. People are drawn to you. What are you doing? Where are you going? What's happening? You know, there's something very charming about that. Honestly, it's something that's going to draw people in. And air has an ability to do that. Plus, air really wants to move, and it wants to exchange ideas with other people. So there's something about your essence that's drawing like connection points to you, you know, through other people. Plus that, once again, that fact that you have Pluto right on the sun, and both of those are trying the ascendant, it's almost like you're going to be magnetized right into these catalyst points with people, or people who need a catalyst are going to be magnetized right into you. It's going to be like, boom,
Hmm.
There it is. Something that can seem like a really lighthearted interaction where you're just sort of talking about the day and shooting the shit can suddenly turn Plutonian in a second. And it's almost like there's something in your body or in your immune system that is prepared for the shock of the suddenly catalytic. You know?
Yeah, that's a cool description. That's accurate for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
People come to me with all kinds of interesting stuff, and
Yeah.
also I'd rather go there, like for me, that's what's most interesting, is like getting into the deeper stuff,
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I would expect nothing less looking at this. It's like you're going to be bored if everyone's just talking about the weather and having tea, like it's like
yeah,
we can have tea all right, but you're not going to be talking about the weather over that tea. Put it that way.
yeah, exactly. That's actually one of the reasons why I think I got into astrology, is because
Yeah.
it like gives this opportunity to kind of go to a deeper level of conversation with anybody who you meet.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that is, I think, I guess I would also say that has been a draw for me, being such a 12th houser, in that so much of my interactions with people they scrape about 15% of my full depth capacity. And astrology is this weirdly casual yet not casual world where we're suddenly talking about everything that's under the surface, like the rest of the iceberg, and hey, people pay me for it, even better, but but these deeper these languages where we can talk about these deeper worlds within us, it's very, very interesting. Aquarius does have a proclivity towards the esoteric, which I have always found really interesting about Aquarius, and that Aquarius in many ways is kind of the ultimate sign of the skeptic.
Yeah.
Aquarius researches the heck out of everything and gets all the information, and then kind of fixes itself positionally on its view about that thing. And I think that's where things figure into Aquarius's journey. It's like, well, what about that? That's interesting. Just because I don't know about it doesn't mean that there's nothing to it. Let's explore that. So there does tend to be that quality to Aquarius.
Yeah, totally. And
Yeah.
also the dual rulership of Saturn and Uranus.
Oh, right. Yeah,
Like
totally.
the traditionalist and also the revolutionary at the same time.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah.
I'll say one more thing about that Aquarius rising, is that the connection with Uranus and literal lightning.
Oh, right.
A
Yeah.
couple of years ago, I almost got struck by lightning. Like I saw a lightning bolt hit the ground in front of me. It
Oh
was,
my God.
yeah, it was in Colorado, way up high in the mountains, like outside of Vail.
That was a couple years ago?
Yeah, a
Huh.
couple of years ago.
Okay.
It was yeah. So I always connect that with Uranus and also the Aquarius rising, but it was yeah, I mean, it's a moment that I'll never forget for sure.
Yeah.
It's burned into my mind, literally.
Well, yeah, for good reason. I can only imagine. Uranus would have been, by transit, if I'm calculating this correctly in my head, Uranus would have been opposite your Saturn right at that time, a couple years ago, which might be something interesting to explore.
That is interesting. When was it? It was I guess it was, I think it was 2018.
Mm-hmm.
Summer
Yeah, well,
2018.
you know what? Actually, Uranus would have been still in orb of opposing your Sun and Pluto, and it would have been partially opposite your Saturn, kind of all right at the same time. So yeah, talk about being opposed by a lightning bolt. Like that's kind of exactly what was happening in the chart right at that point.
Super wild.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm calculating that correctly in my head. I'm kind of weirdly autistic for this shit. Like I can see transits, like they pop up in my head pretty fast, and most of the time I'm within a degree or two when I'm thinking about where transits were. But
Cool.
anyway, could look at that another time.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, for the sake of time, let's jump down to your moon. Your moon in Taurus. So if the sun is kind of the vitality of the incarnation, the ascendant or the rising is kind of the shape the body is taking around that vitality. The moon is the instinctual emotional response that one channels their vitality towards in life. So the moon is going to be the fastest moving planet in the zodiac. It's one of the planets where it's actually really important to have the birth time right. Well, for a lot of reasons, but one of them is for getting the moon degree correct, because even like a 5-10 minute later birth time or earlier birth time, whatever, can change the degree of the moon, which is important when you're calculating the chart. But the moon kind of sets this emotional undertone to what's going on in the rest of the chart. And most of us in some way, shape, or form really act from our emotions, and we manifest action from our emotional center and our emotional environment. And that emotional environment is something that's both current and present in the moment, but it also is forged by our childhood, by our mom, by our dad, by our early tribal environment. And these are all territories that the moon rules. So the fact that you have a moon in Taurus would mean that there was probably something about your perception of your early emotional environment that was fairly five senses oriented. It was very, very sensual, very tactile, and probably very practical. In fact, with your moon, I wouldn't be surprised if you had parent who was almost painfully like very on the planet,
Painfully
managing
pragmatic, did you say?
resources and making, yeah. Did you have a parent that matches that description?
Yeah, my dad is Capricorn.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Capricorn, Scorpio moon.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's kind of an intense combo in its own right for other reasons.
It's an intense combo. Yeah, I mean, he's
Yeah.
super deeply loving and caring, but also like emotionally reserved to a T, you know, like, and yeah, very. So I think some of my my thrill seeking tendencies were a reaction to how practical and conservative my dad was.
Yeah. Well, you said he had moon in Scorpio?
Yeah.
Oh, so he had a moon in your, is polar opposite to your
Right.
moon, which is, yeah, I see that a lot between parent and children, by the way. Lots of polar opposites show up in parent-child relationships, which I sort of have outer theories on how we manifest our perfect shadows and balancing forces in our closest relationships. But yeah, it's with your moon in Taurus, what's interesting is no matter how destabilized your environment around you gets, your internal ability to stabilize is pretty strong emotionally. At times, maybe even too strong. Like there can be an immobility about your emotional nature, and like a stuck fixedness about how you run your emotional energy, that if someone's holding their breath waiting for you to change, good luck. They're gonna it's not gonna
Yeah,
happen.
I don't want to be in that position.
Right, totally. But also there is a need for the stable parts of life, or the things that actually, let me come at that from a different angle. There is a need for reliable sources of creature comforts and security and things that are going to basically give you a sense of security in life in a very physical way. So no matter how crazy your adventurous side has gone in life, there's likely to have been a pretty stabilizing force somewhere within you that is always making sure you have the security in some way before you can do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say it's always calculated risk, and there's always this sense of like, coming back to home and spending that comfortable grounding time before going out again.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be the type of person who would just want to like be traveling for like a year or two without ever coming back. Like I like taking trips and recentering, like that style of adventure.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense, because you do have all this Sagittarius, which we're going to talk about, that there's your adventure side. But having that moon in Taurus is kind of you definitely have to have home base. You've got to have the food you like. You've got to have enough money in the bank account. You've got to have a plan for what's going to keep life secure. All of the practical earthy things kind of have to be figured out with moon in Taurus. Yeah.
I see that drive, and I haven't always fulfilled it, because sometimes there's kind of like this drive for like chaos or uncertainty, which is I'm not sure what that is or where you're seeing that, but there's kind of like that. I almost think about it as like the trickster energy of like not wanting things to be too easy or too stable,
Right.
I'll like flip myself around just because it, because things got too comfortable. But I'm noticing now having a wife and a child, I'm a lot more like even keel in general in terms of just like being stable and having stable surroundings and all that such.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And also, once again, we're not really talking about transits today, but the fact that Uranus has been going through Taurus, and thus it's been going through your fourth house since 2018, that would have been a big game changer when it comes to what you need at home and stability. That would have coincided with a big move, that would have coincided with a big shift to your home environment and what that needs to look like. So it makes sense that that's been kind of a recent, what I would assume would be a bit more of a recent change.
Yeah, I moved right around that time, and I've had the most stable home situation that I've had since leaving my parents' house. Totally. Kind of manifest during that time.
Yeah.
And same financially too. Like I'm coming into a place of real financial abundance, as opposed to kind of like constantly being on the edge of. As a single man, I was very comfortable, like really living on the edge with my finances. To the point where I'd be like, this Taurus moon doesn't seem to be activating right now. Like, really living on the edge. But
yeah,
I also have like a lot of faith in my abilities, and it's just the goodness of spirit as well.
Yeah, and even coming back to what we talked about earlier, that Pluto Sun conjunction is something to always figure into the picture, because when you specifically just said, I don't know if I can let things get too comfortable, if I'm too comfortable, am I growing? If I'm not jumping off some cliff, am I really transforming? There's some internal soul pressure to always be hitting your edge on some level, because it's like, do I even have a pulse if I'm not transforming through something intense? And of course, as you get older, you start to temper that a little bit, because you realize life is short. You can't keep burning energy at this level of intensity. Some things got to stabilize. You got to build a little bit of a life. You can't be constantly transforming everything every moment all the time. So that is something that tends to temper a little bit as time gets older.
Yeah, I'd say
Yeah.
that we're in the process with that right now. And also, I like how you put that, and for me, that's going to be a useful metaphor of looking at like, okay, I can get that experience of pushing the edges without endangering my physical body, for instance.
Yes. Yeah.
Lots
Right.
of different ways to do it. Like, I mean, just public speaking, for example, is like a really good way to get that
Mhm.
same type of thrill energy without like
Mhm.
the physical danger of jumping off a cliff on my skis or a mountain bike or whatever.
I'm so glad you brought that up because we're going to get into your node axis with your North Node in Gemini, and we'll have a lot to say about public speaking when we get to that one.
Oh,
Uh,
interesting.
yeah. Yeah. How are we doing so far in the brain? Are we overloaded? Are we doing okay?
I'm good. Yeah, I want to be respectful of your time as well. We've done an hour and a half.
Yeah. Yeah.
What?
Well, let's talk about the Sag stuff. Let's do Sag, Virgo nodes, and then call it, that's just basic houses and planet placements. And then maybe we could do a part two if you want to dive a little deeper on aspects and all that stuff. How's
Okay,
that sound?
great. That sounds perfect.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, so let's jump up to Sag o'clock up here. All of our Sagittarius placements. Oh man, you 83ers. I know a lot of you guys born in 83, and the study of your lives is really fascinating to me, just for a lot of reasons. I mean, one of them being the Pluto Saturn story, but also this Sag story with you guys. You all were born with the Jupiter Uranus conjunction in Sag, with the South Node in the picture. And I'll break that down here in a minute. But first, just an overview. Here we have three outer planets being Neptune, Jupiter, and Uranus, all in the sign of Sagittarius. Sagittarius is a mutable sign that is essentially the sign of the philosopher, like the great adventurer. Sagittarius is here to partake in it as many foreign life experiences as it can to kind of synthesize this huge world view on the meaning of life. And so for Sag, the hunger is never satiated. They are always aiming that arrow at some other adventure and shooting that arrow way over the horizon and riding after it, trying to see where it will take them. So anyone with strong Sagittarius placements is gonna kind of have the nomad within. They're gonna be to some extent a wanderer. Even if they're not physically wandering, in their mind, they're going to be wandering over broad, vast landscapes of ideas and thought and philosophies and theories. And for some people with Sag, it's very, very, very much centers them in religious studies and studies of different beliefs or different cultures. Sagittarius is just very hungry for the foreign, for the foreign from its own experience. And this could look a lot of different ways. I mean, say you have some dude born in Alabama and no one in his family's ever left home, but he's the dude in the family born with like 4 planets in Sagittarius, and he's the one who moves to the next town. That could be his expression of Sagittarius, like he's the one who was the adventurer in the family. Like maybe that's as far as the adventure takes him. Like he doesn't go to Morocco, but he goes to like the next town over and has a foreign experience. It can look lots of different ways, but it will, I would guess right away looking at this that you've had a well-traveled life in many different ways.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. Has that taken you to foreign countries?
Yeah, I've been to, I guess probably like, I don't know, like around 20 different countries, and I've lived abroad in Scotland and in Southern Africa and Botswana.
Yeah. Boom.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate to travel. Like I've been to almost all the states and lots of European countries, and China and Africa and Mexico too.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Pretty broad swath of world.
Yeah, and I've done a lot, like, yeah, I really resonate with the spirit of Sagittarius. For sure. Like whenever I read that description, I'm just like, oh yeah, like I'm almost surprised that that's not my sun sign, because I express so much of that. But even within America, like I've spent so much of it has been this kind of like exploration, physical exploration with the like either conscious or subconscious intention of like greater understanding, you know.
Boom. Yeah.
That's what it's all been, you know. Like I've driven all over the country with that kind of like, it's like, okay, I have a destination, but also there's this like unfolding of self-discovery and, you know, philosophy and my spirituality and all of these things like through that travel.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And yeah, and we'll break down each of these planets here in a minute, but just even you giving that overview of I get the sense as you're talking about it, like there is it's almost like a flow or a current of life that you feel like you're stepping in when you're going somewhere, when you're like on the journey to the next thing. And it's almost like that it's about the journey cliche. It's about the journey, because it kind of is with Sag. It really is about the adventure. Yeah.
Like to just be in motion. I mean, one of my favorite sports is mountain biking, and it's just like, you know, I know hiking and running are very Sagittarian because of like the literal horse legs, but then with mountain biking, it's kind of like it's the same, like just like you're feeling the flow of being in motion and like pushing yourself to go up the hills and then like riding the gravity down the hills.
Yeah, right. You know, I guess that is very centaur-like, and I had never thought about that till now. That's a good one. I start looking at that in people's lives when it's going on.
Totally. It's funny. Yeah, I had a friend, Phil. I still have a friend, Phil. He's we were on the mountain bike racing team in college, and he used to like, we would always be riding around campus, like doing wheelies and kind of playing on our bikes.
Yeah.
This group of girls developed this nickname for him called the Centaur.
Yeah.
Because of the way he would like ride his bike in a wheelie while like standing up on the pedals.
Oh wow. Oh my god. Did he have strong Sag in his planetary placements?
I'm not sure actually.
Oh my god, I'm so curious. I'll bet he does.
I'm just more thinking about the Sagittarius Centaur connection than the specific person. I know he's a Leo Pisces sun and moon.
Oh gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, you definitely have no lack of Sag going on, you know, in a bunch of different placements over here, including the midheaven. And in whole signs, we assess the midheaven as like the floating midheaven. So the midheaven typically can either be in the 11th house, the 10th house, or the 9th house as assessed by the whole sign system. And we can talk about what that means here in a minute. And the south node, which is always the exact opposite of the north node. These two are always on an axis. And we'll talk about that too, because essentially in a past life, you know, the south node, you were a Sag. So really that could have been one life ago, you know, that you have the memory of being a sun sign Sag. So, you know, the sign bears a lot of significance. But just first looking at the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, one thing that's great about having Jupiter in Sagittarius itself is that Jupiter rules Sag, or at least Sagittarius is one of the signs that Jupiter rules. And Jupiter really loves being there. Jupiter is kind of the opposite archetype of Saturn, in that Saturn's one of the great malefics, or the planets that kind of brings challenge in order to help us transform. Jupiter is the great benefic. It brings expansion in order to help us transform. So Jupiter is typically a place where there's some natural blessing or natural expansion in that theme in life. Now, this this is where a lot of people kind of run away with the idea that Jupiter's just good and happy and everything is great wherever Jupiter is involved. But sometimes Jupiter is actually just pouring gasoline on a fire.
Right.
And it's making things big that we don't necessarily want to be big. A classic example,
like this year or last year.
right, exactly, like Jupiter pouring gasoline on the Capricorn fire, as we saw through 2020. Also, you'll watch people go through transits, and actually this one happened to me a few years back, where Jupiter hit my 6th house in Virgo, which is a health house. And the moment Jupiter got there, I was like, oh, this is great. My health is going to be doing awesome while Jupiter is in my health house. And to some extent, it did help things out, but it also made certain health problems huge. So I couldn't avoid them and had to deal with them. So Jupiter will make things big for better or for worse. But also we could just generally sort of see it as a benefic, like kind of blessing the territory where we find it in the chart. So in Sagittarius, Jupiter gets to do what it loves to do, which is find adventure and find things to learn and teach and both receive lessons and give lessons. So this right away gives you this kind of natural mentor, teacher, college professor vibe about you. You kind of are here helping impart lessons, like life lessons, to people, and also picking that up from life yourself. It's kind of a two-way street. So sorry,
I just said, yeah, I feel it.
yeah. It makes sense. Yeah. In some other life, who knows, maybe even in this life, you might end up partaking in some level of higher education teaching, maybe getting your credentials eventually and doing some kind of higher education.
Yeah, that was actually my path. That was what I thought I was going to be doing for quite a while.
Yeah.
And I changed pathways more largely because I didn't want to be beholden to an establishment, or
very Aquarius rising of you.
Right, yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Right.
And I feel like if I kind of create my own structure or get involved with other people who are more like-minded with me, I think there's just bigger growth potential and bigger freedom potential, both financial freedom and intellectual freedom.
Yeah, I'd agree.
That's kind of where that diverged too, but I definitely resonate with the professor vibes. I have an alter ego that is a ski professor too.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I love how you just worded that, because that actually is a perfect segue of merging the Uranus component in with the story, in that we have Jupiter and Uranus in conjunction. I believe they're like within a 5-degree orb, it looks like, of each other. And I mean, talk about making a lightning storm huge. Uranus, like we talked about earlier, is the ruler of Aquarius, and the character it has in and of itself is that of mutation. It is here kind of becoming divergent from the crowd and doing its own thing. We see strong Uranus in inventors, in anyone who's just kind of pulled a concept out of the blue and helped progress our systems of ideals through history. Essentially, they'll have strong Uranus. I think having Uranus and Jupiter conjunct does it does make the electrical component of Uranus really conductive. We'll just put it that way. Your ability to attract sudden disruption in your life is enormous. It's like having a big lightning rod sitting on your head. I guess though, when I say that, lightning comes up from the ground, doesn't it?
What's that?
Doesn't lightning come up from the ground? It doesn't actually hit like the lightning rod. Doesn't it like hit the ground and then come up something?
Not totally sure about that. Definitely feeling the lightning metaphors though.
Right, seriously.
Sudden intense change.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're coming into another one right now. We're like looking at moving the family. So.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, we could well, maybe we'll do a part 2 where we talk about transits and some of the other stuff, because we could probably pinpoint that. But yeah, so just even looking at the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction there, that is a recipe for a lot of disruptions to your belief system. A lot of adventures that suddenly sort of take you off the cliff of what you knew to be the landscape of your life philosophy and just right off into some other world, like over and over again.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, and the fact that it's on your midheaven as well. The midheaven it says a lot about the career and the life's reputation and what you're doing here in kind of what the world sees come out of you in a sense. It's kind of like your reputation in the world. So there's something about what you're doing that is helping people disrupt their own belief systems and find a greater truth in life. And you're probably helping people find their own inner adventure and their own inner seeker of truth, just through, well, probably through just about anything that you're doing professionally. You're bringing that to the job, if you will. But as you hone in on life purposey stuff, you're gonna get more deep in a life path that brings out this inner philosopher, adventurer, seeker element in what you're doing, and probably helping other people connect with it. Furthermore, in a past life, with your South Node, being in Sag, that's what you did then too. There's a lot of this that's like remembering from your past identity, like one of your most recent identities in a past life, if you ascribe to past lives, that kind of remembers what it is to go on the grand adventure and to go seeking the truth of life through exploring the foreign.
That's super interesting.
Yeah.
So I've had a couple of past life readings, and yeah, one of them, I wonder if it was the most recent one. There was this life that they saw that I was in Mexico, and it was like this transformation where this guy basically he was just in really dangerous, like he was involved with cartels and real scary violence and drug trafficking and all this stuff. And the progression of his life was basically to like escape from that and start moving into shamanic practice and leading people through San Pedro ceremonies.
Yeah.
And so he moved from Mexico to the southwest of the United States and started engaging with that and left this whole other life behind.
Yeah, that is Sag on the nose. So perfect. Yeah, that could absolutely be that could be a potential, and it really could even be a series of past lives. It might not even just be the one story, but right. The shamanic figures very heavily into Sagittarian territory. The story of my own Saturn return, I have Saturn in Sag, Saturn conjunct Uranus in Sag, And one day I will tell you that full tale, which was Saggy shamanic AF. But yeah, your soul does remember the shamanic. It does remember what it is to lead people through ritualized or ceremonial connection to the meaning of life and to the divine and to something beyond yourselves. So your life, even in this lifetime, could, by virtue of the fact that you developed that so deeply in past lifetimes, you could be remembering that in this lifetime and just kind of picking up again those abilities and that developed ability to let spirit flow through and to use ritual and ceremony in that kind of Sagittarian meaning of life way, helping people find this deep inner healing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that resonates a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
I've always been really strongly attracted to shamanic practice, and largely up to this point, it's been a self-exploration, you know.
Totally.
But in the past few years, I found more and more people like reaching out to me for advice and information about it.
Mm-hmm.
And personally have been looking for a way to, let's say, incorporate it into more of a ceremonial practice as opposed to this thing that I do by myself that, you know, I'm getting meaning from, but not the same type of depth perhaps that I could get from a shaman or more ceremonial practice.
I would emphasize that by saying this is all in the 11th house. And the 11th house has a lot to do with a group of people. You know, this is where we get out of being by ourselves and far more about being in a group of people. So a ceremony could fall in the 11th house. An organization or a group of people all doing like-minded work, moving towards a similar ideal. That could all fall in the 11th house. Your Saggy stuff is trying to do itself with people. It's trying to do Sag with others.
I feel, I mean, especially this past year, I've just felt really like starved for that type of energy. So I'm feeling a strong pull in that direction.
Yeah. Which is interesting because in 2019, you would have been having your Jupiter return in Sag, and then Jupiter would have been going through Sag, hitting all these planets. So 2019 was probably a pretty social year. I mean, I'm sure you were seeing a lot of people traveling a lot, feeling far more spiritually stimulated, and then Jupiter hits Capricorn, and it all ends, you know?
Yeah, total. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I was getting to know a new place, and my daughter was born in 2019.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. Yeah.
Literal new human being.
Oh my God. Well, let's just touch on a couple more things here and then wrap it. Once again, this is so just like bullet point, you know, we could analyze this for hours. It's already a struggle, even just to get the basic stuff, like do like a small amount of time.
Sharing your process.
Oh, it's fun. I could nerd out about this stuff all day if that's not already obvious. But let's see. So we just talked about that South Node, which is kind of where you're coming from, if that wasn't already obvious to everyone. Yeah, South Node, it can mean a lot of things. The North Node, South Node, which is kind of what I'm about to talk about here, this whole axis right here. They're always exactly opposite from each other. And this is where you can explore lots of different astrological traditions and find lots of different meanings for this particular axis. I've sort of come up with like a synthesis of what seems to make most sense to me. I do see a lot of past life stuff come up around the South Node. So I do tend to talk about past life stuff, you know, when I talk about the South Node. But the North Node, in your case, we've got the North Node here in Gemini. This is kind of like the soul itch of the life in this lifetime. It's like you've got this bag of tricks that you learned in the Sagittarius territory of your past lives, and you've got that to use in this life to work towards this soul itch, in this case Gemini, which it's interesting with the South Node in Sag, you're kind of used to going out and being on the journey and going out and finding the great lesson and going out and seeking, you know, all the stuff that we have been talking about in the Sagittarian territory. But in this life, there's kind of a soul itch to come down the mountain, if you will, come back amongst the villagers and bring your stories to the village. And with that, there's something in the exchange of information in a very daily way with the people in your immediate community, like the people in your village, if you will. It's really important for what you have to offer. Like you're a storyteller in many different ways, having this axis in your chart, but bringing those teaching stories to your village in just like a daily way, you know, bringing what you have to say, bringing the exchange of information is actually something your soul is really looking for in this life. And that could be something kind of like what you're doing here with the podcast, but also I would not be surprised if at some point this really shows up in a big teaching way, if you pursue the path of the teacher, especially as you get older and you ripen even more deeply into layers of maturity that will come in your 40s and 50s and so on. That kind of makes sense?
Yeah, that's definitely where I feel a strong pull there right now.
Yeah.
And always, I mean, since I started working, I've been teaching in one capacity or another. So it's
boom. Yeah.
Very much my thing. Even I'd say more so than even the artwork. It's like expressing myself through teaching feels the most natural.
Not surprised at all. Well, also, you know what? You're having a nodal return, like this moment too, I believe, actually. Let's see, you're, yeah, you would have kind of just had it. Your North Node is 16 degrees Gemini, and I think it just moved down to 14. So yeah, you're really, over the past few months, you would have been going through your nodal return. So it makes a ton of sense that that's really up for you right now.
Yeah, totally. That's cool. Yeah, I mean, I just started teaching a new class, which is via Zoom. So kind of opening up the possibility to be able to teach people anywhere in the world is really exciting to me.
Hell yeah, that's awesome. And actually, it's kind of weird that we're ending here. Well, I guess the other thing I could talk about real quick is Chiron, but Chiron is never real quick. Like, I feel like we could do a whole episode on Chiron in and of itself. But for our purposes, maybe we'll just jump up here to your Venus-Mars conjunction in Virgo, which is actually in square with your nodal axis, which I find to be a really interesting part of this story, actually. Let's see. So Venus is the planet of the heart's desires and the kind of aesthetic and refinement and beauty and pleasure that a person seeks in their life. It's what they find beautiful. And it's also what makes them feel secure, because money is also tied up in Venus. Venus is the minor benefic. You know, if Jupiter is our great benefic, Venus is our smaller minor benefic, and thus is controlling all of the the good stuff. It's funny, I always say that people come to me for readings for Venus things, like when am I going to get rich, when I'm going to meet the love of my life, when am I going to have everything that it's all Venus things. That's why people want readings for.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But you have Venus pretty much right on top of Mars, and this is really like having the woman and the man united in your chart, or the masculine and the feminine, or the yin and the yang, however you want to look at it, in that Mars is very much the primal. It's the animalistic force and the animalistic drive that animates us physically in life. Mars is how we eat, it's how we fuck, it's how we walk, it's how we run, it's how we fight. It is the primal masculine force that animates our bodies. So to have the planet of greatest refinement, you know, our tastes, our pleasures, everything that's good, everything that's romantic, with the planet that has the most to do with primal forces, kind of creates a natural magnetic balance of the feminine and masculine within a person. People who have Venus-Mars conjunctions are very magnetic. People are very drawn to them. They're very attractive. But it also does depend on the sign that it's in. So in your case, the fact that it's in Virgo does kind of set a tone for how that's playing out. Virgo is a mutable earth sign that has a lot to do with service and with practicality and with organization and with the details. Virgo kind of blushes at the idea of, you know, raucous sex or like threesomes or like, you know, all of the more animalistic pleasures, you know, all that part of life. Virgo isn't so interested in the animalistic. Virgo is far more interested in holding out for a simple, true, manageable ideal of its own of its own concoction, whatever that looks like to the particular Virgo in question. So the fact that you have such strong Virgo does mean that there's a huge part of your desire nature that's actually tied up in service. It's very tied up in a type of useful, practical, service-oriented, like well-assessed reality that is clean. It's cleanly assessed. It is, in a sense, compartmentalized. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in that it fits in its place. You know, that's how people with strong Virgo tend to manage and organize parts of their life. Maybe not every part of their life, but parts of their life. In terms of the beauty you're attracted to, it's probably a clean, simple, modest beauty. You know, nothing that's super gaudy or super elaborate or overdone. You know, in terms of how you like to manage your own health and how you like to manage your own body, you know, the Mars element, it's once again probably simple. You're probably sensitive when it comes to tastes and smells as well. Probably like can easily become overwhelmed by any extremity on the five senses. Does all this resonate so far?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that's true. I think one thing I've been noticing or wondering about is just kind of like seeing this influence and also seeing my relative challenge with like really creating good order and structure in my life.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like I see that Mars and Venus seems like it would suggest that, but like for me actually creating that has been really challenging. And like I said, kind of like that trickster energy or whatever it is, like wanting to always shake things up or turn them upside down or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess, you know, maybe you can see it with the square.
I was just gonna say, yeah, I mean, like, you spoke to it so perfectly. I mean, Venus and Mars don't get to organize anything because the moment that they do, Sag just disrupts everything and takes it all on some other adventure anyway.
Right. Yeah.
And
I've come to a point of not needing to, you know, not being a control freak. Like I think one of the shadow sides of Virgo is needing to control everything all the time, you know, and not being able to handle any kind of like spontaneity coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that for me, it's almost the opposite problem. It's like I need a little less spontaneity and a little more like discipline and structure.
Well, you know, it's interesting when I look at how this sits in your chart. This is in your 8th house, you know, so it's Virgo in a territory that has to do with sex, death, and power on the deepest level. You know, it has to do with the deep subconscious. So, you know, one, this is going to seem like a kind of out there example, but it could be one way that it could manifest itself. There could be these situations where you've sort of chosen to walk the razor edge between life and death. And part of what helps you take each next footstep on that razor edge is that Virgo ability to have exacting calculation of what exactly you need to do to take the next step to survive. Well, everyone watching you is like, how are you still alive right now? You know, because you appear to be on death's threshold. But that Virgo ability to assess with razor sharp accuracy, like the pinpoint of the truth, you know, that's part of what seems controlling about Virgo. And yes, when out of balance, it is controlling because the perception of exact minutia, like of perfect details, is so strong. But to use that ability to know when exactly too much is too much and when exactly not enough is not enough is actually an extremely useful ability. And it's actually, it's having a huge part to play in where you're coming from and where you're going. In fact, the past is checking in with Virgo before it gets to become the future, and the future's checking in with Virgo before it gets to become the past. So there's a lot that Virgo's doing for you in your life.
Well, yeah, thanks for that. That's a well described, I would say. And again, the metaphor is pretty spot on in terms of like the picture it put into my head was walking a slack line over a gorge.
Yeah.
Like super literal with your metaphor again. Like,
oh wait, so that's a literal thing that you've done? Like,
yeah, a bunch of times. Although I will say I did have a harness on, so I wasn't actually on the edge between life and death, but it fulfills the metaphor at least.
It does. Oh my God. Wow, that's crazy. But yeah, see, that's exactly it. And you know, this is one of those things too, where we all normalize our own experience. Sometimes I describe concepts to people I'm doing a reading, they're like, well, I don't really think I do that. And then somewhere in the reading, they'll just pluck out some story about their life and I'm like, that's it. Like that right there, that's the unique expression of the thing. Like you just have normalized it, so you don't think it's standing out in that way, or you don't think it fits that concept, but really to anyone else hearing it, it does. So Virgo, I suspect, is doing a lot for you, and that would be something we could explore probably for years in and of itself. But it is a very important archetype for sure.
Cool. Yeah, I like that description, and the visual of seeing it move from the past to the future through that square to Virgo, I think is super helpful. Also, the editor, I've been, you know, in terms of being able to really write and express my ideas, I've been noticing very specifically, like, okay, I'm like proofreading and editing is like, you know, spelling and grammar and all that stuff comes really easily to me.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
It's like kind of like what you said, like it's normalized. Like I don't even think I don't even think of that as a skill set.
Right. You know, weirdly, or maybe not so weirdly, honestly, with Virgo, people especially do that because Virgo is the territory of so much normal shit.
Yeah.
You know, it's there's something about Virgo where it is kind of just the sign of the mundane in a lot of different ways, but that's kind of some of Virgo's shining brilliance, is that where Virgo manages the mundane, you know, the collection of what we do in our days over months, years, decades becomes what shapes our reality. I mean, some little tiny thing that you're doing every day could eventually create disease or eventually heal disease. You know, it's like these tiny little ways that we manage life or mismanage life amount to big problems. in life.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, and thus is Virgo territory. So someone with strong Virgo, you know, once again, this being kind of the checkpoint, you know, the way I would actually put it in your chart is it's like the checkpoint for the story. You know, here in Sag, we've got the big story, we've got the big seeking, the big adventure. It kind of checks in here at Virgo for editing. You know, like, do I have good grammar? Do I have a beginning, a middle, and an end? Do I've got good paragraphs? Whatever it is. And also, does the story really practically apply in a way that helps people? Is the story of service? You know, and then if it passes Virgo test, it gets to go to Gemini, which is where it gets to go out amongst the village people and help them and be a teaching story in the village and in the town and amongst your peers and amongst all your friends. So it's, you know, it's got a job.
Cool. Yeah, that's a very helpful visual. I appreciate that.
Totally. Yeah. This has been a lot. We could talk about Chiron, but I'm tempted to leave that for another time because Chiron's a whole thing. But this has at least been all your planets in main angle. How's this feeling to you?
It's really great. Yeah. It's so it's so interesting to hear your process and see like just see how you go about it, because you know, I've had a number of different chart readings and they've all been like completely different.
Yeah.
And very interesting and useful.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, I would say the way you go through it is more similar to how I do it as well, actually, which is you know, like it's a combination of structure and intuition.
Yeah.
And also like feeling that person's energy and seeing how they respond to it and what information they're willingly sharing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%.
I do something, I don't know if you've ever what you think about this method. I like to do something which is just looking at the elemental balance and then looking at the balance of qualities.
Mm-hmm.
So like something you notice with my chart is the thing I have the least of is water.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And in terms of how that manifests, I think is that for one thing, especially in conjunction or in concert with Taurus moon and Aquarius rising and even Libra, like my emotions are pretty like reserved and almost distant. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's like for some people their emotions are just right there all the time and that's what you get. And for me, it's like somebody will ask me how I'm feeling and I'll be like, well, I think, you know, it's like immediately taking it into the earth or into the air element and out of the water element, you know.
Yeah. Well,
And so
but then
I attracted, as I said, my two watery women into my life, and we live by the ocean, and it's like,
yeah,
I literally intentionally called that element in because I was conscious of that, and I took up surfing, and so I've been like,
there you go.
Bringing it in.
Yeah, I was just going to mention your watery ladies, and that's, you know, we often because I have no air in my chart. There's nothing besides well, my south node is in Libra and I have Chiron in Gemini, but Chiron in Gemini is kind of generational and it's, you know, it doesn't really count as like a personal planet. So there's just really pretty much no air in my chart. And similarly, I attract a lot of air sign people like over and over and over again. And
here I am.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a lot of air sign friends. I've had a lot of partners who have air figuring prominently in their charts. And yeah, like you just said so beautifully with your own life, you know, we're drawn to the element that we don't have because we're trying to find that balance in some way. And we know that it has something that we need. You know, we can feel something kind of out of balance in our life, and we're drawn to create that balance through finding that element in some way.
Mm-hmm. Do you pursue anything like yoga or breath work or anything like that?
I have, yeah, at times. I uh I have such a strange relationship with yoga. Yeah, I have definitely had my relationship with breath work, and I've attracted lots of people who teach varying forms of breath work.
Mm,
Um, it's interesting because I do have my Mercury is in Pisces, which is a weak placement for Mercury, but my Mercury is Cazimi, actually, meaning that my Mercury, I was born with it sitting right in the seat of the sun. So it's within 17 minutes of a perfect conjunction with the sun. And that's a really special place for a planet, the Cazimi point. And there's a way things just kind of download through intuitively where it's like people think that I have a strong Mercury or strong air because of how I talk. And it's like, no, I'm out of the, like, mercurially, I'm out of the way. I'm just letting stuff come through and like down the Pisces slide, really. Like it's not, like it's not, I'm not doing air work with my brain. It's more just intuitive, it's that Cazimi in action, really.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, you kind of answered my question already with that.
Oh, really?
I mean, yeah, because I feel like you express yourself very clearly and eloquently,
Thank
and
you.
that's something that I might have imagined would be a challenge for somebody with very little air. But
Yeah.
you kind of answered the question before I asked it. So
Yeah.
more psychic powers.
It really, like, that's the best way. I mean, it's just kind of like that all the time. Like it's a lot of people think I'm doing far more intentionally than I am, but the Pisces deal is you get out of the way and watch the water come through, and you're just kind of watching yourself like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder what the next word is going to be. I don't know. What's that? You're just kind of watching it happen, and you're like, huh. And that's part of the Pisces detachment too, is Pisces can lose value on themselves and on their, that's where they're so porous, right? In that it's all just coming through. It's not even me anyway. None of it really matters. It's all impermanent, and they lose a sense of boundary and of valuing what they have to offer, and of like a proper established ego boundary, which is important. We shouldn't have come here to be in a body if we didn't want to be in a body, and that's part of the rules of being incarnate. So, that's some of the Pisces challenge being on the planet.
Right. Yeah. Literally losing yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. Need to keep that in mind for my little daughter. She does it. It's
For your
interesting.
little one.
It's interesting to watch her. I mean, I can just already tell that the way that she experiences emotion is so powerful and intense. Like she's so happy and she's so sad. It's like just like
Yeah.
this wild, tidal wave or roller coaster that
Yeah.
for me, like even as a young child, my mom said like I wasn't really like that in the same way at all. And my wife, her mom, is definitely has like the watery waves.
Yeah. Totally.
she has she has Capricorn rising.
Oh, her mom
No,
or
my daughter is Capricorn
okay.
rising and Aquarius moon.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Yeah, this would have been wow, what an intense time to come onto the planet too,
Right.
because for her that 2020 would have all been in her first house, all of those planets. So, the imprint of the first couple of years of life
Mm,
for her is pretty huge. Like I imagine later on in life, the regression back to looking at early life stuff is going to be an interesting process for her, should she choose to
right.
do that. Yeah.
It's been a very strange time to be learning about the world.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
mean, honestly, it's like the timing was divine in a lot of ways for us. Like the pandemic allowed us to all be together a lot
Yeah.
during her early formative years, and it facilitated the career change that I'm going through, which again was like seemed very challenging and painful, but is like transforming into something that I can see is gonna just serve me so much better, and also the greater community, which is,
Yeah.
you know, like that was my soul's desire, is to have that, but I was having a really hard time figuring out what, you know, what that actually meant and how to express it. And I'm still in the early days of that. That's like, because I really focused a lot of that energy on art. It's like painting and drawing specifically, like you know, writing is art and music is art. But with painting and drawing, it was like trying to express all these airy ideas, concepts with the physical matter.
Yeah.
Is like, as I'm sure you well know, it feels very slow and limiting sometimes when you're trying to express so much.
Yeah. Your time lapses were great, by the way. I remember because there was a minute where you were uploading a bunch of those. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, I went really hard on the time lapse for a while.
Right.
I actually am just making one again. I like it's the geometry.
Yeah.
That being also like a very Virgo expression of those other energies coming through the Virgo, and you're like, all right, let's organize this artwork and keep it.
One of my good friends, Asa from Source Vibrations. I don't know if you've ever listened to Source Vibrations, but it's like solfeggio harmonic. I mean, it's essentially music that's created on like sacred geometry. I don't understand it very well. I don't speak math. I don't speak geometry. I don't even speak music, but there's a way he does this thing where he makes sonic medicine out of all of it. And he also has Venus Mars conjunct in Virgo. And he, like, all the art that he's made has a sacred geometry, like that's central to everything that he makes in his life. So that's interesting hearing you hit on that as well. It seems, seems in alignment.
Yeah, it's like I can't help it. It's like literally like the thing I must do as soon as I got done with, you know, like when you study art, you go through all these exercises to practice learning these different concepts. And as soon as I got done with all that, it was like geometry, mandalas, sacred geometry, like all this like super structured, careful work that in a way, like, it drives me a little crazy because it's such a slow way to work, but it also does feel like it's how I want to express myself.
It's so polar opposite for me, and I have people with strong Virgo into my life because I am so Pisces. Like, it's a polarity thing, and I watch like Virgo-y people doing Virgo things, and I'm just like I just can't. I can't. It's so the opposite of how I work that I'm just fascinated. I'm always just like, how are you organizing space that meticulously? Because it's just not at all how it's ever going to work for me, like even remotely.
Yeah, polar opposite.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your insights with everybody.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation. It was really fun. I love nerding out about charts, and anytime you want to talk astrology, I'm happy to.
Awesome. Yeah. Let's definitely get into that. I'd love to talk about the next episode. But yeah, for now, do you have any final message you want to share with the viewers?
Oh man, pressure. I don't know. Like, I don't know. I think we're heading into a better time, I guess. You know, I've been looking at the astrology of 2021, and it looks like a mixed bag, which I think is an upgrade on total hellscape, you know? Like, I think it's getting better. I think we're on our way to a better place. Specifically when Jupiter dips into Pisces mid-year, May and June, I think part of July, things feel like they're on their way to a renaissance. So think about what you want to contribute to the renaissance, I guess. You know, what's your big contribution to the next wave of progression? I guess that's what I got.
Thank you. Yeah, that's very prescient right now.
Yeah.
I feel like there's this big theme of outdated structures falling apart.
Yes. Yeah.
And through like, yeah, it's a painful process because we've built so much on these structures, and you know, some of them are structures that really only serve a very small minority of people, and
Yeah.
keep so many others in this state of barely surviving.
Yeah.
I think one of the really cool, interesting things happening, like Uranus moving through Taurus, is like the currency reset, and yeah, like just changing the way we interact with money, because I mean, just for instance, watching the government suddenly create trillions of dollars out of nowhere, being like, wait a minute, well, why am I like slaving away, wasting my time at, you know, for whatever meager payment I can get, when that much money can be created out of nowhere.
100%.
But yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff with that coming change, and I really do think that like we have the potential to liberate humanity through changing the way that we interact with money and with value, and creating a more fair system that serves everybody, you know. I think
this really dovetails with, and this would be an episode for another day, but talking about the grand conjunction, the Saturn Jupiter conjunction at 0 degrees Aquarius that happened December 21st, and how that brought us into an air triplicity, and we're done with the 200-year Earth triplicity that would have ended as of that same date. And you know, the Earth structure being a pyramid, right? Like the few at the top can have the most while everyone at the bottom has less. That's collapsed now, and we're air triplicity for the next 200 years. So there's a lot that's changing structurally in terms of what power looks like, what resources look like, what sharing of resources looks like. Air, like water, can kind of move anywhere at any time, you know. So in coming out of the Earth triplicity into the air triplicity, it's like if you're at the top, you're not so happy, right? Because now, like, stratospherically, everything's kind of at the same place. Whereas if you've been at the bottom this whole time in the Earth triplicity, you're kind of like, oh, cool, you know, maybe we can,
right.
You know. But yeah, that would be an episode for another day, but an awesome subject, and what that, like, forward. And your point, you know, I think we're heading into a time where it's far more, I don't know, since you're a Libra, we'll make it a Libra word. Let's just say fair, just. Something like that.
Definitely seems to be a theme of my life. Seeking that balance.
Yeah, my dad's a Libra, and yeah. Yeah, it's a thing for Libras for sure.
Dang, yeah, I mean, just observing such great injustice is really like, it's hard on the senses in so many ways.
Yeah,
I do see it. I do see big changes coming. It's just change comes with breakdown and with challenges. So we're in one of those